mysteries lurk beneath the soil? Could there be hidden gems waiting for us to find?
What's up, guys? Today we're going to be exploring the fascinating world of sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are native to Central and South America and were thought to be cultivated around 4,000 years ago in Peru. Around the 15th century, Christopher Columbus came to the New World. He discovered how amazing sweet potatoes were, and he brought it back to Europe, where it started to gain more and more popularity. Sweet potatoes and regular potatoes are both nutritious and delicious, but they do have some key differences. Sweet potatoes are in the morning glory family, while regular potatoes are in the nightshade family. The nightshade family includes things like tomatoes, and peppers, and eggplants. Sweet potatoes are very high in vitamin A. A daily serving will give you around 700% of your daily requirements. With regular potatoes, the rest of the plant besides the actual tuber is toxic. However, with sweet potatoes, you can eat everything. You can eat the root part, the sweet potato, you can eat the stems, you can even eat the leaves, which are actually more nutrient dense than the root itself. A lot of people in Asia like to use it for different stir fries, and I believe they use it in Africa for different stews as well. So sweet potatoes are an amazing crop to grow if you live in the right environment. So to help us know if we're living in the right climate to grow particular plants, the USDA created this thing called the Plant Hardiness Zone Map, which pretty much breaks up the US into 13 different sections, one being the coldest, like upper parts of Alaska, and 13 being the warmest, which is like the far end of like Puerto Rico. Sweet potatoes thrive in zones 8 through 11, and you can push them to grow in zone 5 through 7, but you need a little bit more prep work for that since you're gonna have a smaller window of available time for you to grow. Here in Tampa in zone 9B, they are a staple crop to grow in the summer. During the peak summer months, it gets really hot and it becomes very unenjoyable to come out to the garden, even in the early mornings. So this season, I decided to grow sweet potatoes, and that was a beautiful solution because they're sort of like a set it and forget it type crop. They don't really need a lot of maintenance. So one thing to note about sweet potatoes is that they actually like soils that are lower in nitrogen. If you do have a soil with a lot of nitrogen and you're growing sweet potatoes, you're gonna notice that the vines are looking tremendous and amazing and are growing like crazy. But when you go to harvest it, you might not get good root production because to grow the actual roots, you're gonna need things like phosphorus and potassium. So when you're re-amending your bed, use a good all-purpose fertilizer that's not too high in nitrogen. And if you want, you can also add in some bone meal that'll add that extra boost of phosphorus and calcium that your sweet potatoes will love. Sweet potatoes grow from something called a slip, which is a sprout that comes out of a mature sweet potato. If you've ever left a sweet potato on your counter for too long, you'll notice that it'll start sprouting. So you can either buy ready-to-use slips from your local garden provider, or you can make slips yourself, which is incredibly easy, and I highly recommend that you at least try to do it. There's a couple different ways that you can make your own slips. One is taking a mature sweet potato and putting it in either water or soil and putting it about halfway into each medium and allowing that, waiting a couple weeks, and eventually you'll start seeing slips growing from that. From there, you have to take the slips out and put them in water so that they can root, as you can see here. The main thing to consider if you're doing this yourself is timing. Since it takes a lot of time for the sprouts to develop off of the mature sweet potatoes, it also takes some time for the roots to develop on those slips. So all in all, it'll take around a month if you're beginning from a mature sweet potato to actually get slips that are viable to put in the ground. You can cut that time in half by doing like I said and asking somebody if you can cut some of the vines off their sweet potatoes. Just make sure you have permission, man. Don't go stealing people's sweet potato vines. This last season, somebody gave me a small portion of sweet potato that had a pretty thick root on it, but it also had a really nice stem. So it wasn't like a pure slip. I just decided to put that into the ground and it worked out perfectly timing wise because I had purple whole pink-eyed peas growing and they were already mature. And by the time I put the sweet potato plant, just that one slip into the ground, I was able to get my harvest of pink-eyed peas. And by the time that they were, finishing their production, the sweet potatoes are ready to just completely take over my bed, which they will do because sweet potatoes like to vine out and take over everything. So just be wary about that if you're growing things next to sweet potatoes. If you guys don't have access to a raised bed or you guys don't have a garden, people love to grow sweet potatoes in grow bags and have actually been very successful growing them. Just do some research about what soil mix to use for container growing because it is different than the soil that you find in raised beds. So at this point, you should have your slips ready to go and ready to be put into the ground. Spacing on sweet potato slips is about 1 to 2 feet apart, and each row about 3 feet apart. All right, once you got your sweet potato slips prepared, you want to plant them so that all the exposed roots are underneath the soil. And for that first 2 weeks, you want to make sure that you're watering pretty regularly so that the actual slips can establish and they don't get dried out. After the 2 weeks, depending on rainfall and the weather conditions, you can kind of cut back on watering. Sweet potatoes take a very long time to produce, around 3 to 4 months, so just consider that when you're growing. After these 3 to 4 months, you can start checking to see if you have mature sweet potato roots. To do this, cut away some of the vines and dig right underneath that exposed root, and you should find a good cluster of sweet potatoes. I'd recommend use your hands instead of a shovel to start digging because it's really easy, and if you don't know how it grows, to cut a sweet potato in half, and you really don't want to do that. So in the beginning, I would definitely start using your hands, and once you get a good idea of where the sweet potatoes are, you can gently use a shovel, but in general, use your hands. It takes more time, but it's more rewarding, and you're definitely gonna be less likely to cut a sweet potato. Normally, per slip, you should be able to get around 5 pounds of sweet potato, but this variety that I grew in my garden actually grew 10 pounds of sweet potato, which is insane. I think it's due to the actual variety that was grown. It's called, I believe it's called Tai Nung number 64. It's a Taiwanese variety that my friend gave me, and it's ultra productive in Florida. So I'll put the link in the description if you guys are interested in checking it out. So once you've collected all of your sweet potatoes out of the ground, you might be tempted to wash them since they have a bunch of dirt on it. Definitely do not do this. If you wash them, it's gonna introduce moisture into the sweet potato and might lead to rot. You also might damage the delicate skin, and that will also lead to rot and bruising, which is something that you don't want. What you should do is just brush off the dirt with a soft brush and then put them in a cardboard box to cure. This is something that I didn't know when I was first growing sweet potatoes, or just about sweet potatoes in general, that you need to let them cure for a couple weeks before you actually can cook with it. A fresh sweet potato has a lot of starch in it, and it doesn't have a lot of the sugar that gives sweet potatoes that distinct sugary taste. So the curing process actually develops those sugars over time. And to do so, you want to put them in a well-ventilated box, like a cardboard box with the top open, and you want to put it in a warm part of your house, like on top of a fridge or in your garage, and let them sit there for around 7 to 10 days. This allows the sugars to develop and allows the outside skin to sort of harden up so that you can store it for months and months. After those 10 days, they should be ready to eat. Speaking of eating, a great and easy way to prepare sweet potatoes is by cutting them up into small bite-sized pieces and tossing them in olive oil, salt, pepper, and your favorite herbs from the garden. I love to use things like rosemary, sage, and dill. In this recipe, I used a combination of all three, and it turned out fantastic. Once they're nice and coated, you want to put them on a baking tray and roast them until they're nice and golden brown. Super, super simple, super delicious. Sweet potatoes are an amazing crop to grow. They're super fascinating. They have a deep history, and I already get the feeling that it's gonna be one of those crops that I grow every season because of how easy and rewarding it can be. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and if you're curious to learn more, go check out my other videos on this channel. Other than that, I wish you guys the best and happy growing.
That's actually super good, I'm not even gonna lie.